If the spirit of him who was raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies, also through his Spirit that dwells in you. Amen. Who has been with a loved one when they are dying? All of us. Who has been with a loved one when he died and watched his spirit move out of him to be forever with God? Who has been with someone who seemed on the brink of death and then all of a sudden, or even gradually, turned a corner to live again in this world? For all of us who have experienced one of these scenarios firsthand, or even if we have not, we can imagine, can't we, the drama that must have surrounded the deathbed of beloved Lazarus, brother of Mary and Martha, and treasured friend of Jesus, first in his death and then in his being raised from the dead. These dramatic stories we get to read this fifth Sunday of Lent, indeed anticipating the death of Jesus and resurrection, which we will be celebrating in just a week, beginning with Palm Sunday. But we're not there yet, and we're not there yet even to the story from John's Gospel. I want to first look at those dry bones in our first reading from the prophet Ezekiel. What can be more a sign of deadness than dry bones? There is no life in those bones in the valley whatsoever. The only chance of resuscitation must come from a source outside that valley. To the refugees from Israel in the Babylonian exile, with 30-year-old Ezekiel among them in their exile away from home, Ezekiel sees many visions and prophesies many prophecies that God gives him, including being told to eat a scroll so that God's words will be sweet in him. Over time, Ezekiel sees and hears from God regularly. Just a few years into this sojourn in Babylon, he receives the vision we heard today, the valley of dry bones, the vision for God's Spirit, ruah, the same word in the Hebrew that is used in Genesis when God takes a lump of clay and animates it with God's breath, is now used here to describe these bones that will all of a sudden be brought back into life, coursing with God's Spirit. What powerful imagery indeed for us today, when we might feel dead or lifeless or just have no energy. Like Ezekiel, we cannot keep this vision to ourselves. We must report it to the people. For the people in exile, Ezekiel's proclamation that these dead bones will rise again becomes unqualified good news to those who consider themselves dead. This is the good news that people can live, can be enlivened by the Spirit of God this side of the grave. This is a promise of exiles, release to exiles that have been oppressed by military powers. This is good news to the oppressed exiles that have been beaten down by their own sins. To all this and more, the Spirit of God can and will give life. Fast forward 600 years to Palestine, 33 AD. Jesus' dear friend Lazarus was so dead that his sisters feared the stench when Jesus had the rock rolled away. Lazarus had been dead 4 days. These are dry bones. This critical story in John's Gospel, a hinge event in Jesus' history, told only in John's Gospel, and the seventh of the 7 signs or miracles recounted in John's Gospel, is both a portent of Jesus' true identity and power and a portent of his own encounter with death once he reaches Jerusalem. In this raising from the dead, Jesus reveals his true identity as the Messiah and gives those who are against him an even stronger motive for seeking his death. And this is a highly personal story for Jesus because he is confronting the death of his beloved friend Lazarus and the impact on his friends, Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha. Now, Lazarus' sisters have sought Jesus because their brother was very ill. But Jesus' love for Lazarus and his sisters manifests itself first to me in a peculiar way. What is the first thing you do when you hear someone is ill? You rush to their side, you call them, you text them, you email them, you rush to the family. You do something to get the word out and to get an update about your beloved friend. Jesus, strangely, seems to be in no hurry, no urgency to going to see his ill friend Lazarus. Instead of rushing to his friend's side, Jesus promises that Lazarus' illness will not lead to death, but to God's glory. Say what? Accordingly, Jesus lingers for 2 more days before journeying to Bethany. Why 2 days? Apparently, Lazarus died immediately after that initial message was sent to Jesus. For by the time Jesus reaches the tomb, it is the 4th day since Lazarus had died. There was the belief at the time that after death, the spirit hovered about for a period of 3 days before descending to Schell, the place of the spirits. By not raising Lazarus until the 4th day, there could be no doubt that Lazarus was physically gone. But there's another, more important reason for why this seeming delay. Jesus is not at the beck and call of any special family or group. And Jesus seems to know, he always knows, that this is not really the end for Lazarus. Lazarus is beholden to someone far greater than his 2 adoring sisters. A harsh reality, and perhaps it seems insensitive, but it is as if a space is being made for something much larger. And so it is. Before reaching Bethany, Jesus tells the disciples what will happen there. There had been open hostility of the religious authorities toward Jesus that had caused Jesus and his disciples to return to the other side of the Jordan, where his ministry had begun. There, a message from sisters Mary and Martha reaches Jesus, telling him that their brother Lazarus is ill. Jesus tells his disciples, subtly at first, then bluntly when they misunderstand, Lazarus is dead. So when he gets to Bethany, Martha trusts Jesus' word. Mary needs to have Jesus' words put into action, and Jesus weeps. Shortest sentence in the New Testament. Jesus wept. Not just for the death of his friend, I suggest, but also for the power of death itself. We've all seen it. The way it ravages and cuts short human life, and the way death devastates those left behind to mourn and grieve. Then Jesus prays in order to testify that the power for his moment comes from God to him. He then orders Lazarus, his beloved friend, to come out. Then Lazarus himself stumbles out the tomb door, grave clothes and all still clinging to his body. Interesting enough, at the Bible study this morning, one of the participants noted that the word wrapped in cloth reminds us, I never thought of this till today when I heard it, of Jesus being wrapped in cloth, swaddling bands, as we used to say, from the story from Luke at his birth. Now we have bands of cloth being unwrapped by the command of Jesus for this dead man to rise again. These stories are so powerful. I can't imagine what it must have been like to be at that scene with Martha and Mary and others gathered and see this dead man come out of the tomb. these highly dramatic stories at the end of Lent as we anticipate the new life of the resurrection of Easter remind us, and we need that reminding sometimes, that God's Spirit has always been at work to bring life from death. They also challenge us. Do we believe in life from death when we, like Ezekiel, face despair, or like Mary and Martha, grieve for those we love? It's a question that we must ask ourselves personally and as a church. How do we take things that may seem dead and bring them alive? Whether that's in a personal relationship, in a work relationship, in our relationship with God, in a relationship with the church. Episcopal priest and author takes the question, how life from death, new life from death, ways to start again. Can these bones live again? And ask the question of the Episcopal Church in her latest book, Church Tomorrow. It's a fascinating question, and one that your vestry will be exploring this Friday at our retreat. One we'll all be exploring, one we are exploring. Indeed, there's so much life and new life in this church, beginning with our youngest members who are about to burst through that door, to new programs of creation care, to programs of justice, to new members. There's so much happening. In fact, my favorite way to describe the health of the church is to look at our community partnerships. So we will be looking as a vestry, as a congregation, about what we can learn from seekers, or all seekers, in and outside the church, about bringing new life, even more new life to our lives at St. Anne's. So stay tuned for more. This thing I know for sure, one thing of which I am certain. When I hear and read that God has the power to bring Lazarus back to life through Jesus Christ, when I hear that God has the power to breathe ruach, life into the skeletons in the desert, I know that God has the power to breathe life into all the deserts in my life, to breathe life into all the deserts in yours. Amen.